So one really cool application that we've been working on with Canadarm as our frame of reference for how we describe it to people is actually using virtual reality. So augmented reality, you can still see the world around you, but you have holograms projected sort of in your field of view. In virtual reality, you kind of enter into a virtual space. And what these images show here, this top image is, again, the Baxter robot. This is a student. He's now graduated. Congratulations. He's a doctor now. He is, David, he is using these handsets to get Baxter to fold a t-shirt from over here. And this view on the bottom is actually what you see in virtual reality. So in virtual reality, you see the controllers of the robot, you see the shirt, you see the camera view of the robot too. And one of the things we were able to develop here is that you can use these types of controls to get robots to do a whole bunch of different tasks, both gross motor movement tasks, so like big kind of sweeping movements, as well as fine movements. And it works over the internet, this whole system. So the way the virtual reality headset talks to the robot, it works over wireless internet. So we've tested it over 50 miles. So we were controlling robots about 50 miles away. My students this semester, one of their goals was to try to increase that distance from here in Colorado all the way to the East Coast, which is about 2,000 miles. And we weren't able to get there with all the disruptions due to COVID-19, but hopefully next year. That'd be really great. Okay, so there's a lot of really good things that can come from, people working together with robots and helping keep us safe and extend our both like literal and kind of figurative reach across the world and the universe and beyond. But there's also a lot of concerns about what are the bad things that can happen to people and our labor force and our workers too. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of those things. So I think a really good example that worries me somewhat has to do with the vision for how autonomous driving is going to go in the next few years. I would say probably next decade. Automated trucking is a really good example here. This company on the left, Starsky, they actually recently just folded, but they're one of many companies that are really interested in automating trucking across the country. And this is important because trucking makes up a huge proportion of our economic activity. The estimates that I was reading were from 2017, and they were saying something like $700 billion worth of economic activity is attributed to trucking. And it's a really important, the jobs that are created by trucking are really important oftentimes to local economies. The estimates that I saw were saying something like in 29 of our 50 states, trucking is one of the most popular jobs. And these types of jobs also tend to be good jobs. They tend to be fairly high paying. The people who do them have a much lower poverty rate as compared to other types of jobs, especially the other types of jobs that you can get without a college degree. You don't need a college degree to be a trucker. So with the disappearance of truck drivers, so something like 300 million. That's a big difference, but there's a lot of truck drivers that might be displaced from these efforts, basically. And truck driving is actually an easier kind of type of driving to automate than regular driving that you and I all do around Colorado Springs. And the reason for that is because, they oftentimes stay on highways, which are more predictable. The traffic is more predictable. There's no lights. It's the speeds are slightly, they're fairly consistent across states. We have like the national regulation for maximum speed, like those sorts of things. So what they're thinking, what this will look like is the autonomous trucks does the majority of the driving, let's say from distribution center to distribution center, but then a human pilot that might be remotely located kind of takes control and drives the remainder of the I guess path. So from the distribution center to the specific Walmart, let's say. So there might be a need still for some people, but probably not nearly as many as that you would need if you just had these drivers like driving the trucks as they are now. So here is an example. This is actually the route that the first fully autonomous route from end to end all the way across the country that happened, I believe it was last year, and it was a butter delivery. So they delivered like 40,000 pounds of butter or something, fully autonomous from California all the way to the East Coast with no stops. No stops. They did have a human pilot on board as like a check. So they stopped a couple times for the human pilot, but no interventions were needed. The human pilot never needed to take control of the autonomous system for a safety reason, let's say, completely autonomous. So it is coming. It's, like I said, it's already on the road. And it's something that I think as a society will be important to think about what we do with a lot of these displaced workers as a result of all this autonomous trucking. Here's a look at what some of the factories look like inside Amazon. So Amazon's been in the news a lot lately as a result of COVID-19. But when I lived in the Northeast, I got to see one of the testing facilities that they have for the robots that are currently fielded in all their warehouses. So it's right outside of Boston. And these are what the robots look like that are in all the warehouses right now. And what they do is, in these giant warehouses, they've got all the products in these yellow stacks, and they're located all over the place. And instead of requiring their workers to run all over the warehouse to grab the products, these robots drive underneath them, and they lift the whole shelf and then bring the shelf to the person who packs the box, essentially, and that's before it gets to you. And a lot of people are employed doing this. They basically pick the item and place it in a box like all day long. That's what they do. So Amazon, is a giant employer in this country, and I think that's evidenced by a lot of what we know about Amazon. But we also know it's also a very desirable employer, because in the last couple of years, when Amazon was announcing its headquarters its HQ2, something like 40 cities were all like clamoring to have Amazon like come to their city and set up so that they could have, thousands of jobs there. And they ended up choosing Crystal City right outside of DC, which was kind of an odd choice, I think, but that's where it's going to be. But here's what Amazon is planning to do. So here's what they want to do. They would prefer to eliminate the human pick and placers altogether. So you can Google right now, like Amazon pick and place challenge. And it's basically like a giant research challenge for how to get roboticists to help them figure out, how do you get that last step? Like a robot brings the shelf, but now we need a robot to pick the object off the shelf and place it in the box. And significant investments have gone into funding researchers to figure out how to do this. And a lot of it have been focused on a lot of like soft robotics research, which you see here. These are different types of grippers that people are experimenting with on how you can get robots to pick up lots of different types of objects, as well as deformable objects. So like a bag of chips you can think of, when you pick it up, it's sort of like, not here in Colorado, it's kind of weird. They're always inflated, but they're like kind of squishy, or they need to be delicate with it or something like that. So there's a lot of research happening in that area. And as soon as, they get a very viable, reliable, durable product going, you can probably count on a lot of those jobs being eliminated as well. So that's a problem. And then in addition, when I was working with the Humanity-Centered Initiative there, one of the major topics that would come up a lot, especially from economists, had to do a lot with the difference between productivity and wages. So historically, we as a human species are the most productive than at any point in our existence. We produce more stuff of value for our employers than we ever have before. We've gotten really good at it, and we do it with fewer and fewer people. And it's primarily been because we have better technologies for all of these things that have allowed us to do that. Like, I'm talking to you all now remotely, and we're having a meeting as if it was, any other day, but now more people can join from all over the place, and we don't need the same kind of resources that we used to make that happen. So although productivity is way up, wages are not. So there's economists sometimes argue that all of this automation, robotics, all of these things that we've said help us be safer and more productive are actually taking advantage of people, because we are not compensated at the level that we should be, because we are, you know, our employers maybe are making a lot more money off of our efforts, but we are not seeing the benefits of that. So that is a common argument that you will see from economists, and when they talk about the pros and cons of robots and automation, let's say.